I knew something had shifted the moment I walked into the executive floor and saw Daisy's desk completely cleared. Not just organized, emptied. Her coffee mug with the faded Yellowstone logo, the framed photo of her twin daughters, the succulent she'd nursed back from near death 3 times, all gone. Just a bare surface, and a folded piece of paper with my name written in her careful handwriting. Belle, they didn't even let me say goodbye. Watch your back. Marcus isn't what he pretends to be. My stomach dropped. Daisy Emerson had been the Chief Technology Officer's executive assistant for 11 years. She'd survived 4 CEOs, 2 major acquisitions, and the catastrophic data breach of 2019 that nearly bankrupted the entire company. If they'd cut her loose without warning, without even a proper send-off, then the rules had changed and nobody had bothered to tell me. I stood there in the empty corridor, morning light slicing through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and felt the weight of what was coming. Marcus Whitfield had been acting director for exactly 9 days. 9 days since Jeffrey Carver, our CEO, had left for that emergency board retreat in Switzerland. 9 days since everything I'd built over the past decade had started cracking at the foundations. Quick pause before we continue. If you're listening to this, there's a 97% chance you haven't subscribed yet. Takes 2 seconds, costs you nothing, and genuinely helps us keep bringing you these stories. Like goes even further. Alright, back to the situation that was about to detonate. Jeffrey and I had an understanding. Not friendship exactly. We weren't grabbing drinks after board meetings or texting about our weekends, but we had something better. We had trust built on results. When I told him a system would hold, it held. When I flagged a vendor as unreliable, they proved me right within a quarter. When I said we needed to triple our backup protocols before the new federal compliance regulations hit, he signed off without question. And when those regulations did hit 6 months earlier than anyone predicted, we were the only firm in our sector that didn't hemorrhage clients or face penalties. That earned me operational latitude. Real latitude, not the fake kind where managers say you have autonomy, but still want daily status reports and approval for every minor decision. Jeffrey had told me explicitly before he left. You run the infrastructure team. You answer to me and only me. Keep everything stable while I'm gone. Marcus is handling business development and client relations. That's his lane. You stay in yours. I should have known it wouldn't last. Men like Marcus don't stay in their lanes. They see lanes as suggestions, as obstacles to their vision of how things should run. And Marcus had a vision. Alright. I'd heard him at the last quarter's leadership summit pontificating about agile transformation and flattening hierarchies and eliminating bottlenecks that existed only in his imagination. That first Monday after Jeffrey left, Marcus showed up in my department at 7:45 in the morning. I was already at my desk halfway through my second coffee reviewing the overnight server logs. Our Singapore office had reported some latency issues. Nothing critical but worth monitoring. I was deep in the data when I heard his voice behind me. Bell Chandler, I presume the legendary guardian of the code. I turned. He was leaning against the doorframe of my office, arms crossed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a burgundy tie that matched his pocket square. His smile was the kind that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that said he'd already decided something about you before you opened your mouth. Just Bell is fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. What can I help you with? I wanted to introduce myself properly. I know Jeffrey kept our departments fairly siloed, but I think there's real opportunity for collaboration here. Cross-pollination of ideas, breaking down those old barriers. I nodded slowly, waiting for the actual request hidden beneath the corporate speak. I'd love to set up some time this week, go through your team's processes, understand your workflows, see where we might find some efficiencies. Efficiencies, I repeated, testing the word. You know how it is. Every organization has redundancies. Systems that made sense 5 years ago but might not serve us today. I just want to make sure we're being strategic about resource allocation. There was redundancies. Resource allocation, the vocabulary of someone preparing to cut. Our infrastructure is lean, I said carefully. We run on a team of 8. Every person has specialized knowledge and specific responsibilities. There's no fat to trim. Marcus' smile widened, but something cold flickered behind it. I'm sure you believe that, but sometimes we're too close to our own work to see objectively. Fresh eyes can be valuable. He left before I could respond, but the message was clear. He was coming for my department. The only question was when and how hard. I spent that entire week in a state of heightened alert. I started arriving earlier, staying later, documenting everything. Not because I was worried about my own performance. My record spoke for itself, but because I'd seen this pattern before. New leadership comes in, needs to make their mark, needs to show they're shaking things up and adding value. And the easiest way to do that is to act something visible and claim it was necessary evolution. On Wednesday, Marcus called an all-hands meeting. Mandatory attendance, no exceptions. We gathered in the main conference room, the one with the glass walls that made everything feel like a fishbowl. Marcus stood at the front with a presentation already loaded. Title slide readings, streamlining for success. Our path forward. I sat in the back, laptop open, taking notes. He started with platitudes, thanking everyone for their dedication, acknowledging the company's strong foundation, talking about exciting opportunities on the horizon. Then he clicked to the next slide. Organizational restructure phase 1. My pulse quickened. We've identified several areas where we can consolidate functions and eliminate overlap. This isn't about cutting people. It's about positioning us for sustainable growth. The slide showed a new org chart. My infrastructure team, which had always reported directly to the CEO, was now a subdivision under a new department called Integrated Technology Solutions. And the head of Integrated Technology Solutions was listed as to be determined. Someone behind me whispered, "What does that mean?" It meant Marcus was creating a new layer of management between my team and executive leadership. It meant he could install someone loyal to him, someone who'd do what he wanted without pushback. It meant my direct access to Jeffrey was being severed. After the meeting, I tried to catch Marcus, but he was surrounded by a cluster of managers, all asking questions. I waited for 20 minutes, watching him deflect and redirect, offering vague reassurances that meant nothing. Finally, I gave up and went back to my office. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daisy's note. They didn't even let me say goodbye. Watch your back. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I pulled up my employment contract, the one I'd signed 8 years ago when Jeffrey had promoted me to Director of Infrastructure. I'd negotiated it carefully with the help of an employment attorney who specialized in tech sector agreements. At the time, it had seemed almost paranoid the level of protection I'd insisted on. Now I was grateful for every clause. I scrolled to Section 12 subsection D termination and severance provisions. There was buried in the dense legal language. If I were terminated without cause during any period when the CEO was absent or temporarily replaced or during any interim management period, I would be classified as severed due to organizational restructuring. An organizational restructuring triggered a completely different set of protections. Full severance package, immediate vesting of all stock options, acceleration of any performance bonuses, and most importantly, release from my non-compete agreement. I'd negotiated that clause after watching our sister company get gutted during a merger. Good people fired by temporary managers who didn't understand what they were dismantling. I'd sworn I wouldn't let that happen to me, and Jeffrey, to his credit, had agreed. He'd signed off on the contract with barely a glance. Trusting that I wasn't trying to screw the company over, I wasn't. I was just making sure the company couldn't screw me over. I took screenshots of the relevant pages. Then I backed up every file, every project plan, every architecture diagram I'd created over the past 8 years. Not because I was planning anything, because I'd learned a long time ago that preparation isn't paranoia. It's survival. By Friday of that first week, 3 more people had been let go. All of them long-term employees. All of them dismissed during Marcus' early morning meetings with HR. The pattern was obvious, brutal, and efficient. He was cleaning house, removing anyone who might question his authority or slow down his agenda. I kept my head down, kept working, kept documenting, and I waited. The explosion came on Monday of the second week. I arrived at 7:30, same as always, and found my access badge wouldn't work on the executive floor. The light on the card reader blinked red 3 times, then nothing. I tried again. Same result. A security guard I'd known for years walked over looking uncomfortable. "Miss Chandler, I think you need to go to HR. "Why?" "I don't know the details. Just that your access has been modified." "Modified. Not revoked. Modified. Corporate speak for we're about to do something to you. But we're pretending it's not a big deal." I took the elevator down to the 3rd floor where Human Resources occupied a corner suite. The HR director, Kendall Harrington, was waiting for me in a small conference room. She didn't meet my eyes when I walked in. "Belle, thanks for coming down." "Didn't realize I had a choice," I said, staying by the door. "Please sit." Sat. Kendall shuffled some papers, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, she slid a folder across the table toward me. "What's this?" "Effective immediately. You're being reassigned. You'll be transitioning from Director of Infrastructure to Senior Infrastructure Consultant. It's a lateral move. No change in compensation, but your reporting structure will be different." I opened the folder. The new org chart showed my name in a box 3 levels below where I'd been. My new manager was someone named Christopher Vance, who according to his listed credentials had been at the company for exactly 4 months. "Who authorized this?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Marcus Whitfield in his capacity as acting director, and Jeffrey approved this." Kendall hesitated. "Jeffrey is unavailable for consultation at the moment." "That's not what I asked. Marcus has full operational authority during Jeffrey's absence." I stared at the papers processing. This wasn't a termination. It was worse. It was a demotion disguised as a restructure designed to humiliate me into quitting. If I walked away, they'd avoid the severance. If I stayed, I'd be neutered, stripped of authority, working under some mid-level manager who'd never designed a network architecture in his life. "I need time to review this," I said. "The change is effective immediately. Your new workspace is on the 2nd floor." I said, "I need time to review this." Kendall's expression softened slightly. "Belle, I don't make these decisions. I just implement them." "Then tell Marcus I'll respond by end of business today." I left before she could argue, taking the folder with me. But I didn't go to the 2nd floor. I went back to my office on the executive level. My badge still didn't work, so I waited by the elevator until someone else came through and slipped in behind them. My office looked exactly as I'd left it. Computer still on, coffee cup still half full. I sat down and pulled out my phone, then called my attorney. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Diane, it's Belle Chandler. I need you to review something urgently." I photographed every page of the reassignment letter and sent them to her along with photos of my original employment contract. Then I waited. She called back 30 minutes later. "This is a constructive termination," Diane said without preamble. "They're trying to force you out without technically firing you. But based on your contract, specifically Section 12D, this qualifies as organizational restructuring during interim management. You have grounds to treat this as an involuntary termination. Meaning every protection in your severance clause activates, but you need to be careful about how you respond. Don't resign. Don't accept the new role. Tell them you're exercising your right to legal review. Then wait for Jeffrey to return. If Marcus pushes, if he formally terminates you or forces the issue, you'll have even stronger grounds. And if he doesn't push, if he just leaves me in limbo, then you document everything and wait." But something tells me Marcus isn't the patient type. He was right about that. I spent the rest of that day working from my office, ignoring the reassignment letter, responding to emails as if nothing had changed. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Marcus appeared in my doorway. "I heard you didn't go down to your new workspace." "I'm reviewing the terms of my reassignment with legal counsel," I said calmly. His jaw tightened. "There's nothing to review. This is effective immediately. My contract specifies that any material changes to my role require notification and review period. I'm exercising that right. Your contract was negotiated with Jeffrey. I'm in charge now and things are different. Jeffrey is still your acting director. There's a difference. Marcus stepped into my office, closing the door behind him. The air felt suddenly dense, charged with barely contained aggression. Let me be very clear, he said, voice low. You can accept this change gracefully or you can make this difficult. But either way, the change is happening. Your choice is whether you want to stay with this company or not. I met his stare without blinking. I'm not going anywhere. Then go to your new desk. After my review period, there is no review period. My contract says otherwise. We stared at each other, neither backing down. Finally, Marcus smiled cold and sharp. Fine, take your review. Period. But understand something, Belle. The world has moved on from what you built here. We need forward thinking, not someone clinging to legacy systems. You're relic, and relics get archived. He left, door slamming hard enough to rattle the frame. I sat there for a long moment, hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline spike. Then I opened my laptop and started a new document. Timeline of events. I documented everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every veiled threat, timestamps, witnesses, exact quotes where I could remember them because this wasn't over. This was just beginning. That evening, I went home and poured myself a glass of wine I didn't drink. I just sat on my couch staring at my phone, debating whether to try to reach Jeffrey. He'd said he'd be unreachable for most of the retreat, off-grid in some luxury lodge in the Swiss Alps, detoxing from technology and reconnecting with the board members who controlled our funding. But this felt important enough to interrupt. I drafted an email, kept it professional, factual, non-emotional, explained the restructure, the reassignment, Marcus' behavior. Ended with a simple question. Did you authorize this? My finger hovered over the send button. Then I deleted the draft because if I sent it, I'd look weak. Like I couldn't handle my own problems. Like I needed Jeffrey to swoop in and save me. And that would undermine everything I'd built. All the credibility and respect I'd earned. I'd handle this myself. The next morning I went directly to the second floor. The workspace they'd assigned me was a cubicle in the middle of a sea of identical cubicles. No door, no privacy, no window. Just a small desk with a slightly outdated computer and a phone that hadn't been plugged in yet. Christopher Vance, my new manager, stopped by at 9:15. He was younger than me by at least a decade, wearing designer glasses and an expensive casual outfit that screamed startup culture. Jeans, blazer, white sneakers. Real welcome to the team. I know this transition is probably weird, but I think we're going to do great work together. What work exactly? Yes. Well, you'll be supporting our infrastructure initiatives. Providing consultation, documentation, best practices. Really important stuff. I built the infrastructure. I don't need to document best practices. I wrote them. Christopher's smile faltered. But, yeah, of course. Marcus just thought it would be good to have your expertise more distributed, instead of siloed. Siloed. I repeated flatly. In a good way, like making sure everyone benefits from what you know. I didn't respond. Just looked at him until the silence became uncomfortable. Anyway, Christopher continued, I'll send over some initial projects. Nothing too urgent, just, getting acclimated. He left quickly, clearly relieved to escape. I sat in my cubicle surrounded by the low hum of fluorescent lights and muted conversations and felt the full weight of the insult. They'd taken everything I'd built and handed it to people who couldn't tell a firewall from a filing cabinet. And they expected me to smile and play along. I lasted 3 hours. Then I went back upstairs. This time I didn't ask permission. I walked past the card reader, found an unlocked side door near the emergency stairwell, and slipped through. Made my way to my old office. My things were still there, but someone had left a box on my chair. The message was clear. I ignored the box and logged into my computer. Then I did something I'd never done before. I accessed the executive share drive, the one that held confidential memos and strategic planning documents. My credentials still worked. Marcus hadn't thought to revoke them yet. I found what I was looking for in a folder labeled Leadership Transition Q1. A presentation Marcus had created timestamped from 3 days before Jeffrey left for Switzerland. The title slide read Organizational Optimization Personnel Reduction Strategy. Opened it. Page after page of analysis recommendations, target positions. My name appeared on slide 14, highlighted in yellow with a note in Marcus' handwriting. Priority removal resists change. Expensive legacy knowledge holder recommend consultant reclassification or termination. He'd planned this before Jeffrey even left. He'd waited until the CEO was unreachable, then executed his strategy with surgical precision. I took screenshots of every page, saved them to an encrypted cloud drive. Then I cleared my browser history and logged out. When I turned around, Marcus was standing in the doorway. "What are you doing in here?" "Retrieving my personal files. This isn't your office anymore." "Then change the locks," I said, brushing past him. He grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to stop me. "You're making a mistake. You could have transitioned gracefully. Now you're just making yourself look difficult." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. "Take your hand off me." He let go but didn't step back. "Last chance, Belle. Accept the new role, or I'll have to consider your refusal as a voluntary resignation." "I haven't refused anything. I'm reviewing the terms as is my contractual right." "Your review period ended yesterday according to whose timeline?" "I'm in charge until Jeffrey comes back." Marcus's expression hardened. "You think Jeffrey's going to save you? You think he cares about your hurt feelings?" "He green-lit this restructure before he left. He knows we need to cut cost. You're just too proud to accept that you're not as valuable as you think you are." That landed like a punch. Not because I believed him, but because a small part of me wondered if it was true. Had Jeffrey known? Had he approved this? Was I really just an expensive legacy knowledge holder who'd outlived her usefulness? But then I remembered the contract, the specific clauses I'd negotiated, the protections Jeffrey had agreed to without hesitation. He wouldn't have signed off on those terms if he'd planned to undercut me the first chance he got. "Show me the authorization," I said. "Show me Jeffrey's signature approving my reassignment." Marcus' silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said and walked out. The next 3 days were tense but quiet. I worked from the cubicle, doing the mindless tasks Christopher assigned me, while simultaneously documenting everything and preparing for what I knew was coming. Marcus was circling, looking for an excuse to pull the trigger. I just needed to make sure that when he did, I'd have everything in place to detonate his entire strategy. On Thursday afternoon, Kendall from HR called me. "Brielle, can you come down to conference room C? When now, please?" I saved my work, locked my screen, and took the elevator down. When I entered the conference room, Marcus was already there along with Kendall and someone I didn't recognize. A man in a dark suit with a leather portfolio. "Belle, this is Kenneth Shaw from our legal department," Kendall said. I nodded at Kenneth but didn't sit. "We've asked you here because we need to formalize your employment status," Marcus said. "Your review period has concluded and we need a decision. Will you accept the reassignment, or should we process this as a voluntary separation?" "Neither," I said. "I'm exercising my right to remain in my current role until the CEO returns and can review this matter personally." Kenneth spoke up, voice dry and professional. "Miss Chandler, the acting director, has full operational authority during the CEO's absence. Your current role has been eliminated as part of an organizational restructure. The position being offered is the alternative. If you decline, we'll have no choice but to process your departure. Process it however you want," I said, "but understand that I'm not resigning. If you're terminating me, put it in writing and include the reason." Marcus leaned forward. "You're being difficult for no reason. I'm protecting my rights. You don't have any special rights. You're an employee like everyone else." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have very specific rights outlined in Section 12, subsection D of my employment contract. Rights that activate during exactly this kind of scenario." I watched the realization flicker across Marcus's face. He hadn't read my contract. He'd assumed I was just like everyone else at will employment with standard terms. Kenneth cleared his throat. "We're aware of your contract terms. However, this isn't a termination. It's a restructure with alternative placement offered. A placement 3 levels below my current role with no direct reports in a cubicle instead of an office reporting to someone with a fraction of my experience. That's a constructive termination, and my contract treats it as such. The room went silent. Kendall looked at Marcus. Kenneth flipped through his portfolio, clearly trying to find my contract. Marcus' jaw worked, grinding his teeth. Finally Marcus stood. Fine. If you want it in writing, you'll get it in writing. Effective immediately. You're terminated for insubordination and refusal to accept organizational changes. Marcus, Kendall said quickly. Maybe we should draft the termination letter. Marcus cut her off. She wants formal documentation. Give it to her and make sure it's clear this was her choice. He stormed out. Kenneth gathered his things and followed. I stayed standing, watching Kendall, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. He just made a very expensive mistake, I said quietly. Brielle, I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted this to go. It's fine. Just make sure that termination letter includes his signature, today's date, and the specific reason he cited. Insubordination and refusal to accept organizational changes. Exact words. Why? Because those exact words activate every protection in my contract. And Marcus just handed me leverage I wouldn't have had if he'd been patient. Kendall stared at me. You wanted him to fire you. I wanted him to show his cards. He did. I left her there and went back to my cubicle. Packed my personal items into the box they'd left on my chair. Photo of my parents. Plant I'd somehow kept alive for 6 years. Few books. Not much really. Most of what mattered was digital, already backed up and encrypted. By 5 o'clock the termination letter arrived via email. Formal, cold, exactly what I'd asked for. I forwarded it to Diane immediately along with screenshots of Marcus' presentation and timeline documentation of everything that had happened since Jeffrey left. She called me 10 minutes later. This is airtight. He violated your contract in every possible way. Termination during interim management without cause based on organizational restructuring. That's the trifecta. What happens now? Now we file notice with the company's legal department formally invoking Section 12D. They'll have 48 hours to respond. If they don't remedy the termination, all your severance provisions activate automatically. Stock options vest immediately. Bonus acceleration kicks in. Non-compete becomes void. The whole package. And if they try to fight it, they won't, because if they do, we'll sue and discovery will uncover Marcus' entire strategy. That presentation you found, that's evidence of premeditation. They'll settle fast to avoid that becoming public. How much are we talking about? Diane paused and I heard papers shuffling. Based on your stock options current valuation and the accelerated bonus structure, you're looking at somewhere between $850,000 and $1.20, $2 million depending on how the stock vests. I sat down hard on my couch. Say that again. Approximately $1 million. Belle, your contract was extremely well constructed. Whoever negotiated it knew exactly what they were doing. I negotiated it. Then you knew exactly what you were doing. I laughed, slightly hysterical. I was just trying to protect myself. You did more than that. You built a financial lifeboat and Marcus just threw you into it fully stocked. We talked through the next steps, filing procedures, timeline, expectations, what to say and not say if anyone from the company contacted me. By the time we hung up, it was past 7. I poured that glass of wine I hadn't drunk the night before and finally let myself feel it. Not triumph yet, just relief. The kind of relief that comes from knowing you'd prepared for the worst and the worst had come and you'd survived it. Jeffrey returned from Switzerland on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after he'd left. I know because I was copied on an email he sent to the executive team at 7:43 in the morning. Back in office, catch-up meetings all day. No interruptions unless critical. By 9:30, according to a friend who still worked in the building, Jeffrey's assistant had cleared his calendar and closed his office door. By 10, Kendall from HR had been summoned. By 10:30, Kenneth from legal was in there too. I wasn't there to see it. I was at home working on a consulting proposal for a competitor who'd reached out the day after my termination. Word travels fast in our industry. When someone with my reputation suddenly becomes available, people notice, but I heard about it later. Heard about it from multiple sources who all told slightly different versions, but agreed on the essential facts. Jeffrey had walked into his office to find a stack of termination notices on his desk. 12 people let go during his absence. Good people, long-term employees, all terminated by Marcus for various reasons that boil down to organizational optimization. My name was on top of the stack. The moment Jeffrey Carver walked back into his office on that Tuesday morning, the air in the building shifted. It wasn't just his physical presence. He'd always carried himself with quiet authority, but the sudden, palpable tension that crackled through every floor, every department like static before a storm. By 9:30 a.m., his assistant had sealed his door shut and led every scheduled meeting. By 10 o'clock, HR Director Kendall Harrington was summoned, her face ashen as she passed through the lobby. By 10:15, Kenneth Shaw from Legal was seen sprinting toward the executive suite, leather portfolio clutched tight. And then came the moment everyone whispered about for weeks. The stack of termination letters on Jeffrey's desk. 12 names, 12 loyal employees, engineers, operations leads, support staff who'd survived mergers, market crashes, and leadership upheavals, only to be unceremoniously erased in less than 2 weeks by a man who'd never once logged a production ticket or debugged a server crash. My name sat on top. According to my friend in accounting, a woman who'd once covered for me during a family emergency and whom I'd helped navigate a wrongful PTO denial, Jeffrey didn't yell at first. He just stared at the stack. Then he flipped through each page slowly, methodically, his jaw tightening with every signature. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, but sharp enough to cut steel. Get Marcus in here right now and get legal on standby. Someone's about to have a very bad day. Marcus arrived at 10:45 a.m. striding through the executive floor like he owned it. Witnesses later told me he was wearing that same burgundy tie, the one that matched his pocket square, and carried a smug half-smile. He'd probably rehearsed his talking points: streamlined operations, cost efficiencies, agile realignment. He likely imagined Jeffrey would applaud his decisiveness, maybe even accelerate his permanent appointment. After all, hadn't he fixed the bloated legacy teams? Hadn't he modernized the org structure? What he didn't know was that Jeffrey didn't view infrastructure as dead weight. He viewed it as the bedrock. And Brielle Chandler wasn't just a director. She was the architect who kept the company compliant, stable, and competitive, while others chased shiny distractions. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. No one knows exactly what was said behind that closed door, but the aftermath spoke volumes. Marcus emerged, not with a promotion, not with a handshake, but ashen-faced, trembling slightly, eyes fixed on the carpet. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't gather his team for a debrief. He walked straight to his temporary office, grabbed his jacket, and left the building without looking back. His access badge was deactivated before lunch. His email disabled by 1:00 p.m. His LinkedIn profile, updated just days prior with the title Interim Director of Strategic Transformation, would soon be scrubbed of any mention of the company. Noon, my phone rang. Caller ID Jeffrey Carver. Bell, it's Jeffrey, he said, voice stripped of its usual calm. Mr. Carver, I replied, pulse steady. Don't, he cut in softer now. Don't do that formal thing. I screwed up. I left a fox in charge of the henhouse and came back to find carnage. I'm calling to apologize and to ask what I can do to fix this. I took a breath, not out of shock, not out of anger, but out of the quiet certainty that the reckoning had arrived. You can't fix it, I said. I can reinstate you full authority, full role, more than you had before if that helps, Jeffrey, I said gently. He fired me. The termination already activated my contract provisions. Stock options vested this morning. The process is in motion. A long silence. Then how bad? Bad enough that your legal team is going to advise you to honor every clause without fighting it. I'm not worried about the money, he said, and I believed him. I'm worried about losing you. That landed differently than Marcus' threats ever had because Jeffrey wasn't posturing. He wasn't trying to intimidate or diminish. He was grieving not just the loss of talent, but the betrayal of trust he'd placed in the wrong person. And in that moment, I saw him not as a CEO, but as a leader who'd failed to protect what mattered most. "I can't come back," I told him honestly. "Even if I wanted to, even if you fixed everything, I can't work somewhere where someone like Marcus could do what he did. Where I'm one co-vacation away from being erased." "He's gone," Jeffrey said immediately. "Terminated effective immediately." "That doesn't change what happened," I replied. "The damage wasn't just to my role. It was to the psychological contract every employee has with their employer. If I deliver excellence, I will be treated with respect and stability." Marcus had shattered that, and no reinstatement could glue it back together. Jeffrey sighed. A deep, heavy sound that carried the weight of leadership regret. "What do you need from me?" "3 things," I said. "Honor the contract, don't fight the severance, and write me a reference letter that makes it clear this wasn't about performance." "Done," he said without hesitation. "All of it. I'll have the letter to you by end of day." "Thank you." "For what it's worth, Belle," he added, voice thick with sincerity. "You built something extraordinary here. The fact that Marcus didn't understand that I didn't protect it well enough, that's on me. But what you created, it mattered. Still matters." We hung up. I sat on my couch for nearly an hour, phone in hand, staring out the window at the Austin skyline. What I felt wasn't triumph. It wasn't bitterness. It was something rarer. Closure. Clean, final, and earned. At 4 p.m. the email arrived. Subject line, personal reference, Jeffrey Carver. The letter was 3 paragraphs of unambiguous praise. It detailed my leadership during the federal compliance crisis, my role in designing the disaster recovery protocols, my mentorship of junior engineers, and my unwavering integrity. And then the clincher. Belle Chandler's departure is a direct result of interim mismanagement during my absence, and in no way reflects her capabilities or value. Any organization would be fortunate to have her. I forwarded it immediately to the 3 firms already courting me. 2 fintech startups and a global data governance consultancy. Within 24 hours, all 3 increased their offers. 2 weeks later, the settlement cleared. Diane had estimated up to $1.2 million. The final figure, $1,375,000. After taxes and legal fees, I netted just over $900,000. It wasn't life-changing in the way a lottery win might be, but it was freedom-changing. The kind of capital that lets you say no to toxic cultures. No to undervaluation. No to leaders who confuse confidence with competence. I didn't post about it. Didn't write a Medium essay titled "How I Got Fired and Made $1 Million." I simply accepted 2 consulting engagements, rented a quiet office downtown, and began building again, this time on my own terms. But I did keep one eye on Marcus. 6 weeks after his ouster, he popped up on LinkedIn as Director of Business Strategy at Nexor Solutions, a mid-tier SaaS firm known more for aggressive sales than technical rigor. His post read, "Thrilled to join a visionary team committed to operational excellence and bold transformation." No mention of his prior role. No acknowledgement of the carnage he'd left behind. I almost commented, almost wrote operational excellence. You couldn't tell a DNS record from a database index. But I didn't because I knew better. Reputation is a slow burn and fools reveal themselves in time. And they did. 3 months into his tenure, Nexicor suffered a catastrophic system failure. A misconfigured cloud migration approved by Marcus, according to insiders, corrupted their primary client database. 16 hours of downtime, $4 million in direct losses. Key clients jumped ship. The CTO resigned in protest. Marcus was fired within a week. I heard the news from a former colleague now at a rival firm. She texted, "Karma's got a timestamp." Huh. I didn't reply with glee. Felt nothing. No shot in Fred. No gloating. Just a quiet acknowledgement that systems without accountability eventually collapse under their own weight. As for me, I'm thriving. My consulting rate is triple what the old company paid. I work only with clients who value documentation, precision, and ethical governance. V built a small but elite team of engineers who share my belief that infrastructure isn't back office. It's the foundation of trust in the digital age. And every single contract I sign now includes explicit clauses about interim leadership, restructuring triggers, and accelerated vesting during CEO absences. I've even started advising startups on compliance by design, embedding legal safeguards into their cap tables and org charters from day one. Marcus taught me a brutal but invaluable lesson. Your value must be codified, not assumed. So I codified it in contracts, in architecture diagrams, in non-negotiable terms. I don't think about him much anymore. He's irrelevant. A footnote in my professional evolution. But sometimes late at night when I'm reviewing my portfolio and see those vested options still appreciating, I remember his smug voice in the conference room. You're just too proud to accept that you're not as valuable as you think you are. And I smile because I knew my value. I'd written it into my contract, time-stamped and notarized. And when he tried to erase me, all he did was activate the very protections he'd been too arrogant to read. The system I built held not just the servers, but the framework of self-respect, the architecture of boundaries, the code of conduct I refused to compromise. Marcus thought he was cutting dead weight. What he actually did was fund my independence.